Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Joe, and we are at CES Unveiled, which is basically like a preview to the actual show at the Consumer Electronics Show 2019 here. So we're going to kind of get a sneak preview of some of the coolest stuff that's going to be on the show floor, but we're going to get this early view of it. So we're going to go over what I think are some of the most interesting products here, and they got some really cool stuff. So we're going to take a look at it, and let's get started. We can start off with one of my personal favorites, which is actually from LG, and that is their new home brewed device, which you can kind of think of like an automatic coffee maker, almost like a Keurig for beer. Now, this is really interesting because unlike a Keurig, which you can make instantly in a couple minutes, this actually goes through the whole brewing process, and it takes about 2 weeks to go through the whole thing, and you have the same type of pods. I think there's 4 total pods for each batch that you make, one for a big malt capsule and then 3 smaller ones that include things like yeast or flavoring or hops, and then all of those are going to come in one box per batch. And there is, of course, going to be different flavors that you can choose from, whether it's going to be an IPA or a wit beer. And I believe this makes up to 1.3 gallons, which is going to be around 10 pints of beer. So it's not that quick, 10 pints over the course of 2 weeks, and you can, of course, only make one at a time, but still pretty cool for people who want to brew their own beer but don't really want to go through all the extra work involved with it. There's not really any price yet, but I'm pretty sure we can assume it's going to be very expensive and probably only for the most enthusiastic enthusiasts. Next up, this one is also really cool. It's called the BreadBot, and it's basically a giant machine that just makes bread all day. And this is not obviously going to go in your home. This is more for retail locations. A business will basically lease this thing from the company, and then, of course, that will include all sorts of maintenance and stuff like that. But the idea is that consumers will then go into the store, and instead of buying pre-made bread with all sorts of preservatives and stuff that was made who knows how long ago and shipped to the store, they can literally see their bread being made and then get it hot off the oven. And you can see here that there's a whole process going on from the yeast and rising the bread, and then it comes off and is stored in this shelf, and it makes one about every 6 minutes or up to about 235 per day. And it is, of course, fresher bread, and they said it's going to be around the same price, maybe a little bit more expensive, but of course you're probably going to be willing to pay a little bit more if you can actually see it being made. It's 100% fresh than something off the shelf. And I did try it, and it was pretty darn good. I'd probably be willing to pay a little bit more if I saw this giant loaf of bread right in front of me being warmed. So I like this thing. And another cool thing they said is that in the future, at least, there is the possibility of being able to make different flavored bread, so potentially banana bread or something like that, and you'd maybe even be able to control, say, the amount of banana you want in the banana bread and awesome stuff like that. I believe they said that's in a future version, but that's still awesome to hear about. So I really like this thing. Moving on, we have an interesting new charging solution, and it's not actually wireless, it's direct contact charging, but you don't actually have to plug anything in. So this is called the Energy Square, and the advantage of this is you have these metal squares that you put in a surface or on some sort of pad, and then you have another device on the bottom that you would attach to like the bottom of your laptop or your phone as a part of a case, and then you sit it down onto this charging mat, which can be any size that you want, and it starts charging by contact instead of induction. And the advantage of this is that it charges at full speed. It's not like induction charging, which is slower than wireless charging. This actually has contact from surface to surface, so there is no slowdown in charging speed. So you can take your laptop into work. If you have this on your desk, you can sit it right down, and then you don't have to plug in any wires. You can pick it up like normal. It's a lot easier. So this thing is really cool. Up next, we have an interesting light called the White Rabbit by a company called Penguin Innovate. And it's basically a spherical light that moves on a rail. You put it up in your house or wherever, and it will kind of follow you around. Or you could also control it with your phone. And the idea is, of course, that you can have light wherever you are specifically, and you can change the color temperature as well. So it's either going to be like a day bright, kind of more bluish color, or more of like a yellow, like an incandescent. So you can control that. And they said you can actually have a couple, maybe 2 or possibly even more of these rabbit lights on the same rail. So maybe if you wanted it to have more people in the room, it could follow one person and the other one follows the other person. So that's pretty neat. And it is kind of like a soft rubbery material. It's not like a hard plastic, which is nice. And I'm not sure the maximum length of the rail, but the video they showed had it going pretty decent distance. So I don't know if this is super practical, but if you're really into modern lighting, or maybe you have a business that you want to impress people with, it's definitely something to look at. And finally, we have a drone, but this is not like the normal drones you've seen before, and certainly not one that I've seen. And that is because it's a hybrid powered drone by ITRI, that's the Industrial Technology Research Institute. So what's interesting about this, I found, is that it doesn't only use lithium-ion batteries, but it actually does have a gas-powered internal combustion engine on this. So obviously advantages with that is going to be you don't have to charge an internal combustion engine. You just put fuel in it. It could potentially run a lot longer, obviously, than maybe the battery capacities of today will allow. And it does say that it can run about 45 minutes of hover time with a capacity of 30 kilograms. So that's over 60 pounds. And the one they had on display was pretty big, but they said it's not even the biggest one. The full-size one has 8 blades with over 3-meter diameter wingspan. So that thing is absolutely huge. And some of the use cases they had were agriculture, of course, so spraying pesticides or fertilizer or whatever over a field. So I thought this thing was just neat and worth talking about. All right, so those were some of the coolest products we saw at CES Unveiled, and of course we're going to be continuing with the actual rest of the show. There's a lot more to see. This is just a tiny sliver of what's going to be at the actual CES show, so stay tuned for that. Be sure to subscribe and tune in this week. We're going to see a lot more awesome stuff, and hope to see you then. Be seeing you.